say you're living good. Pretty lawns with fancy landscapes. She stares ahead with a blank gaze in her lovely neighborhood where the living is good.
And the living is good here on KMET, and I'm your host, Mark Gertz. Welcome back to Reverse Your Thinking. We've been gone a couple of weeks due to March Madness. First, congratulations to the Cal State San Bernardino Coyotes, Division II. They are still in the playoffs, as I'm sure many of you listeners know, and their success translated to our demise for the last 2 weeks, but now we are resurrected and back. And we hope that you'll listen to us for the next hour, even though we're not going to be shooting any hoops, but we definitely are going to be taking some risks and helping you reverse your thinking about a whole bunch of stuff. The music you heard at the top of the show was Angie Wells from her new album, Truth Be Told. Congratulations out to her too. Her album dropped 3 weeks ago and was on the radio charts at 200. As of yesterday, it had risen to number 43 with a bullet. So she is just taking off. If anybody out there would like to see what she looks like and how she performs, there's a clip from the premiere of that album at Vibrato in Los Angeles from a couple weeks back on YouTube at Angie Wells Jazz. That's at Angie Wells Jazz. Go check her out, folks. I think you'll be really, really pleased and happy to take 5 minutes out and listen to her and watch her perform. So we're going to cover a lot of territory today. We're going to help you separate fact from fiction. We've got a remarkable guest at mid-show. David Koh is going to join us, and he's going to talk to you about real estate investing from points of view that you've never thought of before. You know, with what's going on in the economy right now, we have to think of more creative ways to get the best return on our money. Now, that's not new news. What is new news is that those of you who are not investing with real estate, and those of you who are not working with other people to combine your assets to be able to share the risk and the reward of real estate investing, are really going to want to stick around today and listen to what David Koh has to say. But before we get there, you know, for those of you who don't know, I'm a mortgage broker. I'm also an accredited financial counselor. I'm also a certified divorce lending professional, and I'm certified as an aging in place specialist. And we're going to cover some of these topics today. I've been getting a lot of calls lately from bankruptcy attorneys. Apparently, there's a lot of real salt of the earth, middle class folks that are finding they have to turn to bankruptcy for one reason or another. And I decided that we should start the show off by addressing those things, because one of those people might be you. And it's really important when you start considering bankruptcy to separate fact from fiction, because the facts of what you knew about bankruptcy 15 or 20 years ago are not facts anymore. It used to be that you could file bankruptcy and you could basically discharge just about everything and start from scratch, start fresh. But that's not the way it is anymore. There are a whole bunch of debts that no longer qualify for discharge under a bankruptcy. Some of these are the same as they were before, like certain types of taxes, especially those to the federal government. You know, Uncle Sam's not going to give you an opportunity to walk away from that. But there are a bunch of other debts that you need to look at, and you need to understand that they're going to be with you, bankruptcy or not. For example, debts that are not set forth by the debtor on the lists and schedules that the debtor must file with the court. In other words, if you file paperwork and you leave something off, guess what? It's not part of the bankruptcy, whether you want it to be there or not. So you need to make sure your paperwork is filled out correctly. If you don't trust yourself to do it, get somebody who's an expert to help you with that. Another debt that's not able to be dismissed in a bankruptcy are debts for spousal or child support or alimony. So if any of you are paying spousal support or alimony, bankruptcy is not going to save you. It's not going to save you. You're still going to have to uh, pay those debts. You're still going to have to take care of your kids, and you're still going to have to help support your ex-wife. When we come back after the break, we're going to go over a few more things that are not dischargeable in bankruptcy so that you can determine the best way to move forward if you need a fresh start. I'm Mark Gertz. You're listening to Reverse Your Thinking on KMET, and we'll be right back after this. And we're back. I'm Mark Gertz, your host, and this is Reverse Your Thinking. Before the break, we were talking about what you cannot discharge in a bankruptcy. What you cannot discharge in a bankruptcy. So in addition to spousal or child support or alimony, you can't discharge willful or malicious injuries to persons or property. In other words, if you're pissed off at your neighbor and you knock down his fence and then he sues you and wins, and then you say, well, the heck with you, I'm going to go bankrupt, you might not be able to discharge that judgment that he got against you. Okay. So in other words, illegal activity doesn't go well in a bankruptcy. Debts to government units for fines and penalties, as well as debts to most government funded or guaranteed educational loans or benefit overpayments. So if you've received money for unemployment that you didn't earn, and now the government wants it back, you can't file bankruptcy and say, tough. Nope, it's tough on you. You're still going to owe it to them. In addition to that, there's been a lot of things in the news the last few months about student loans, educational loans. Basically speaking, student loan debt is not dischargeable in a bankruptcy. So if you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt, you're going to need to look for a different solution than bankruptcy to discharge that. Now, there are some exceptions, but basically speaking, student debt stays with you until you get it paid off. Debts owed to certain tax-advantaged retirement programs. In other words, if you have an IRA or a 401k, and let's say you're too young to take the money, you're not 59 and a half or 60 years old to get your money out without a penalty, so you borrow against it. So you have a debt of 50,000 or 25 or 100,000 against your tax-advantaged retirement plan. If you file bankruptcy, you're not going to be able to discharge that debt either. You're going to have to pay that back. And finally, debts for certain condominium or cooperative housing fees. Let's take a moment and talk about that, because I've met a lot of people that believed that if they were behind on their HOA fees, that they could file bankruptcy and start fresh. That is just not true. Let's separate fact from fiction here. Money that you owe to your homeowners association, you are obligated to make those payments. The law does not allow you to discharge HOA fees in a bankruptcy. So those things you need to handle. You know, that's like if you're behind on your electric bill, all of a sudden you wake up one day and there's no electricity. You can't really discharge that. It's real simple. You use the lights, you got to pay for them. Same thing with homeowners association. They take care of the common areas of your condominium or your townhouse. All right. You get the use of those things. Well, you can't not pay your HOA fees and expect to use bankruptcy as a way to get out of it. Okay. And as I said, the same thing goes for most student debt. Once in a while, under some situations, you can do that. If you can prove that your circumstances, that your finances are never going to improve. Now, hear me, if they're never, ever going to improve. So in other words, you went to college, you got a degree, all right? Now you've got 100,000 in student debt. And even with that degree, you can't find a job and you're not going to improve your circumstances, and you can prove that to the court, they might let you discharge your student loan debt. Okay. But frankly, I wouldn't count on it. Anyway, that's as far as we're going to go on bankruptcy today. We'll cover it again next week because it's a very serious situation that's happening in this country, and millions of people are considering it because of all of the financial aspects that have been happening since COVID-19. But I do want to talk to you about aging in place. Aging in place. What a strange expression that is, aging in place. Don't we all age in place? Even if you're 18, aren't you aging in place? But what we mean by aging in place here is that when people talk about retirement planning, when they talk about retirement planning and they want to figure out what they're going to do for the next 10, 20, 30 years between ages, let's say 60 and 90, many people, the great majority of people, say they want to stay in their homes. And I can totally understand that. I really, really can. People say, I don't want to go into a nursing home. I don't want to go into an assisted living facility. But I'll tell you something about that. How many people do you know that are still healthy and say they want to age in place and say they don't want to move into an assisted living community or an assisted living facility? How many of them have actually ever visited one? Have you? Have you ever even stepped inside an assisted living facility like a Sunrise or a Bristol? Probably not. I think that anybody after the age of 55 owes it to themselves to go take some tours. Go take a tour of an assisted living facility. Go take a tour of an assisted living community or even a nursing home. You know why? Because how could you make an intelligent decision about something if you don't know anything about it? If the only thing you know are the things that are in your imagination about what those places are like. Do you really want to be in your 80s and isolated inside your house with no company, with your kids having moved miles and miles away? Maybe you'd be happier in a community with other folks where you have a social life and you have people able to take care of you better than you're able to take care of yourself, and maybe less expensive than having 24/7 care at home. Anyway, we're going to cover this again later in the show. We're going to be taking a break in a few minutes, and then we're going to have our guest on, David Coe, talking about how to make some money, how to make some real money investing in real estate. I'm Mark Gertz. This is Reverse Your Thinking. And we're back. Welcome back to Reverse Your Thinking. I'm your host, Mark Gertz. It is my privilege this afternoon to introduce you to David Coe. David is a realtor of long standing, and there probably isn't anything in the real estate business that he can't talk to you about backwards, forwards, sideways, and upside down. But I happen to know there's one thing in the real estate business that he is a stone cold expert on, and that is investing. And the reason for that is that he is deeply involved in an organization called Phoebe, which is the largest real estate investment club in all of Southern California. Now, for those of you that are listening to us and you're not in Southern California, let me explain to you what Southern California is. Southern California basically starts in north, about 100 miles north of Los Angeles, and it ends at the Mexican border. All right. So we're talking about a big stretch of real estate here. And David's going to talk to us about that and explain to you how you can take advantage of that. When he's not doing that, when he's not investing in real estate himself and helping other people to make small fortunes, he also loves to hike. And from what I'm told, he's a damn good cook. And if we have time, we'll talk to him about that. But first, let me introduce you to David Coe.
Mark, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Appreciate you having me on the show. And I have to admit, being 54, I'm ready to set up some tours next year at some new facilities.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yes, maybe you'll start investing in assisted living facilities. There you go.
Absolutely.
That's right. Right.
Which you
Well,
can invest in. It's
yeah.
absolutely something you can invest in real estate.
Oh, well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Let's start. I mean, you've got real extensive background in real estate, and I totally get that. And we can talk about that a little bit if you want. But I really want our listeners to benefit from the time with you in terms of investing, in terms of making money, and more importantly, accumulating wealth. So why don't we start here? Can you explain to us what is Phoebe?
So Phoebe stands for Investors by Investors. It's a community of like-minded investors. It was started about 15 years ago. I became a Phoebe chapter leader about 12 years ago, and then I became part of the board that runs Phoebe about 10 years ago. We're a nonprofit, and we believe that there's strength in education and there's strength in community. And we also believe that sales pitches are what make every real estate investment club an absolute nightmare. So we have a strict no sales pitch environment. We completely believe in education. We believe in networking, and that community has somehow been, a part of almost every real estate deal I've ever done.
Really?
Somehow, some way, it's touched every single deal I've ever done.
Six degrees of separation.
So sometimes, most times, 1 degree of separation, right?
Wow.
Like, I found a partner, I found a project, I found people that invested in a deal, I found a lender, I found, off the top of my head, all 4 of those scenarios have happened through direct relationships I've made with people that I've met at Phoebe.
Okay. And how many chapters does Phoebe have?
We have 13 chapters right now. There are 7 that are active in Southern California. I run the one in Manhattan Beach or El Segundo, the South Bay. I was just at a chapter last night in Pasadena. There's 2 out of Pasadena. We've got 1 in Long Beach. There's 1 in Orange County. There's a golf chapter. We actually have a chapter that just goes out and plays 9 holes of golf, and then they network afterwards.
Okay.
Yep. At Virginia Country Club down in Long Beach.
Wow.
And then we've got a chapter in the San Gabriel Valley. And then, we started some chapters around the country, but, we have 1 in Kansas City, 1 in Arizona, 1 in Phoenix, and I think 1 or 2 others that I'm forgetting off the top of my head.
Okay. So let's just handle that for those that are listening from out of the area. If somebody is interested in opening up a Phoebe chapter where they are, where there isn't one now, that is something that they could talk with you about.
They could talk to me about. We need, we have a pretty extensive system for vetting people. Usually we want to know someone that we know is a quality investor, just because we want to be very protective of the brand. But yeah, if someone is doing investing and willing to give back to the investor community, and not sell, absolutely, we'd love to be connected.
Okay, terrific. So we've just come out of 2-3 years under COVID. The market's a little squirrely. We've got banks going under. In your opinion, is this a good time for people to consider joining an investment club?
Well, joining an investment club, let me answer that question. It's the perfect time to join an investment club.
Okay.
When there's chaos around you, you need to be surrounded by people that have information and different points of view, right? No one has the truth. I don't have the truth. You don't have the truth, Mark, right? The truth lies in the individual to hear a variety of opinions and make up their own mind on what they think they should be doing, especially when they're talking about investing their own capital. So the best time to get involved in a real estate community like Phoebe is when you're just trying to understand what's happening, right? Don't listen to CNN, don't listen to Fox, don't listen to Bloomberg, or listen to all of them, but also meet other people that are active in the space doing what you're interested in doing, and then decide, when's the right time for you to deploy capital.
Okay. Well, when I've mentioned investment clubs like Phoebe, a lot of people have said to me, well, I really don't have that much money. I don't really have that much income that I could put into real estate. Is that a deterrent in your mind?
Well, let me distinguish between a real estate investment club and a real
Mhm.
estate investment community. It only
Okay.
costs $20 to come to a Phoebe meeting, and all you're going to get is education and networking. Okay, so we don't co-invest together. We don't pull money together in the club and deploy capital together.
Okay, that's
Part
good.
of what I do is I do syndications where we'll pull together investor capital and deploy it into other assets, but that's not what Phoebe's all about. So when I say going to a Phoebe meeting is now the right time, it absolutely is, because we're not selling anything. We just want to make sure you're educated and ready to make meet some educated people. And one of the things that we like to talk about Phoebe is that real estate investing is the ultimate team sport. There's no I in real estate. No one does real estate investing on their own well. The people that do it the best have teams of people, that they are in connection with, depending on the type of assets they're investing in.
Okay. Well, all right. I'm gonna want you to sort of explain and elaborate that a little bit. Let me just give you an example. Let's suppose you've got someone that's got $50,000, which is not I mean, it's better than a buck, but from a real estate point of view, it's not a lot of money. If they start attending Phoebe meetings, what aside from getting the education, what can they potentially expect to do in terms of finding outlets for that money?
They're going to meet people, right? Because ultimately, real estate is a people business, not a property business, right?
Mhm.
One of the core tenets that I believe in about investing is that a good deal done with a bad person is going to end up way worse than a bad deal done with a good person,
That's
right?
interesting.
Whenever you're investing in real estate, you're making a bet on a person. And when you're talking about that $50,000 investor, I assume you're talking about passively investing in a syndication, right? It's great if the
Mhm.
property is an all-star, but if
Mhm.
the operator is a turd, the deal's not going to go well, right? So
Mhm.
ultimately, you're making a bet on a person who's going to be a fiduciary to your money and making
Okay.
decisions if you had that amount of capital to invest. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But going to a real estate investment club is going to help you meet someone face to face, eyeball to eyeball, and
Mhm.
get a read on whether or not you trust them and whether you believe in their character. And more importantly, has anyone else in the room invested with that person, and what's their ownership experience? Are they honest? Are they trustworthy? Do they communicate? Doesn't matter if
Mhm.
it's good information or bad information. Are they letting you know what's going on with your money? And that's the type of thing that being in a community like Phoebe allows you. It gets you exposure to different kinds of people, different kinds of opportunities, but more importantly, it allows you to meet them, kind of weigh their character and decide if it's someone that you're willing to make a bet on.
I see. Okay. So basically, from what I hear you saying is that it really boils down to who you like and who you trust.
Yeah, and I would even say before that, it boils down to you, right? The number one thing you need to be good at real estate investing is understanding what you want to do, right? Do you want to be active or passive, right? Do you want to have control over everything? Are you a control freak?
Mhm.
Or do you want to not have to think about it? Do you want to make a decision and put it on autopilot? Are you investing for cash flow? Are you investing for depreciation? Are you investing for appreciation long term? Are you investing for your family? Like the best way to invest starts with understanding who you are. Every
Mm.
deal is right for someone and wrong for someone else. It depends on the person, right? Know thyself is the number one rule in real estate investing.
Mhm.
If you don't know thyself, being involved in a community like Phoebe is going to connect you to like-minded people where you can start to see what other people are doing and understanding what you think is going to be the best fit for yourself. Then you can start evaluating opportunities.
I see. Well, that's very different, I think, from the situation that most people find themselves in when they think about real estate investing. They don't have a community like that around them. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. And I think, a lot of people have an aunt or uncle or someone that's successful in real estate, and, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, right? And they'll just, kind of back in on a deal that maybe someone is doing. And maybe those deals go great a lot of the times, but our belief as a Phoebe community is that the more information you're exposed to, the more you can weigh, and I always give this example about return, right? Is an 8% a good return? I don't know. Tell me about the deal. Tell me about the risk. Am I doing ground up new construction, or am I buying a Class A property? Right? If I'm buying a Class A property, and 8% is an amazing return, right? But if I'm doing new construction, and 8% is a terrible return. So, it's hard to evaluate the risk associated with a different deal and do due diligence if A, you don't know yourself and what you're trying to accomplish, or B, if you've got no framework of what what else is out there, right? So deal flow is one of the first things that you really want as an investor, just so you can start stacking things up side by side and making an intelligent decision on whether or not the amount of return they're offering you is worth the amount of risk they're exposing you to.
And are these things that somebody joining Phoebe would learn?
These are things people would learn, and more importantly, joining a Phoebe is an environment where people could actually meet people that may have those investments, right? So, when you say someone has $50,000 to invest, another big part of our world in the syndications is whether or not someone's accredited or not, right? So there are certain levels of net wealth of people that some of these real estate investments, if you don't meet the threshold for being an accredited investor, which at its most basic level is having $1 million of net worth in outside of your primary residence. If you don't have that kind of net wealth, then these syndications are not the right way to you invest. Now, could you take your $50,000 and find someone else who has $50,000 and take $100,000 and go buy a small apartment building or a small house in Phoenix?
Right.
Absolutely. Right. So understanding what your range of options are based on who you are and what your financial situation looks like, being involved in a community like Phoebe, like you're not going to take a college class on this, right? There's no continuing education on this. There's a ton of podcasts on it, a bunch that I'd recommend people listen to. But, what we offer in Phoebe is beyond just the information. We also encourage the networking so people can meet each other and connect.
Gotcha. So as a rule of thumb, when someone, so Phoebe doesn't have like a membership fee. You just come each meeting and pay your $20 and
pay as you go. Yeah.
Pay as you go.
By the way, our belief, here's the other thing about real estate investment clubs. Yeah. The less money you pay, generally, the more value you're going to get. Don't go to a club where someone's going to be ringing the bell at the back of the room for $10,000 of, training and mentorship. They're selling a product, right? What you don't want to do is go to a club where at the end of it, they're going to monetize your visit there, right? Phoebe is a nonprofit for a reason. We don't ever want to make money with it. We just we're not selling anything. All we want to do is create a community of like-minded people so we can meet good people. And honestly, when bad people come through, the network tends to churn them up and spit them out. They don't feel at home, right? So the sharks like to swim with sharks. So, we kind of use that as a way to help insulate an environment as much as possible. And that's, so go to a real estate investment community, go to a real estate investment club, just make sure that they're not, there's no bell ringing at the end of the meeting for you to spend a bunch of money. That money, especially if you have limited capital, should be spent on investing, not on paying someone to teach you how to invest.
I see. Okay. So, true or false, is Phoebe predominantly for people that are new to real estate investing?
False. I would say that about 60% of the people in our community are experienced investors. And the reason why is because we don't sell them anything, right? So if I own a couple of multifamily buildings and I want to learn more about private lending or investing in senior care facilities or investing in, student debt or any of the other things that an individual chapter may cover, they feel comfortable coming because they know there's not going to be something at the end asking, trying to get their hand in their wallet. So I would say usually when I look at my room and I know my room, I was in another room last night in Phoebe, Pasadena. I know most of that room. I would say about 50% of the people, not everyone's super successful. They may have inherited a couple apartment buildings, or maybe they've got a couple of rental properties, but they're doing it, right? And that's what you want to do, is rub elbows with people that are, kind of doing it. We certainly have our share of people that are in the corporate rat race and looking for a way out. But even those people generally are pretty smart. They might own their own home. They've got a working knowledge of real estate, and they're just there trying to get better, trying to figure out how to, become self-employed.
Do you find that most people coming into Phoebe are looking to invest in residential or commercial, or it's pretty much across the board?
I think, the order of fixing it, of investing, like low in the totem pole is wholesaling. Then it's fixing and flipping a house. Then it's fixing one up and buying it. Then it's, buying into multifamily. Then it's getting into commercial, and then it's getting into development. So generally people kind of come from the bottom and work their way up. Just depends on where they are in their investing life cycle.
We're talking to David Koh, and we're talking about his investment club, Phoebe, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Call in and talk to David, 951-922-3532. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back to Reverse Your Thinking, where we take every fact and every fiction and turn them on its head. We're speaking here today with David Koh, who is a realtor that does something a little bit different. Not that he doesn't represent buyers and sellers. He definitely does, and does it really, really well. But he's deeply involved in an investment club called Phoebe. That's pretty big here in Southern California. That's it. And Southern California is anything south of Santa Barbara. So that's a big piece of real estate that he's doing this in. David, I think you mentioned earlier, but how many years have you been active in Phoebe?
Well, I've been active for 12 years. My first 2 years just as someone in the audience. In the last 10 years, I actually 14 years in Phoebe, 12 years as far as running a real estate investment club.
Running a real estate investment club. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But again, I just want to, because you made the distinction before the break. You're talking about a real estate investment club that's there strictly to create relationships and to share knowledge. You're not talking about an investment club where people are trying to sell each other products or services.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. That's a pretty big distinction, isn't it?
It is. And I'm not saying that there aren't some clubs out there that form where someone may say, hey, listen, I'm looking for a bunch of people that are interested in investing in medical facilities. Mm-hmm. So there might be some clubs that form with that kind of purpose, but that's not what our club was formed to do.
Gotcha. Okay. So the purpose of this club is to share knowledge, share information, find people that you trust, get some knowledge from other people's experiences. And find people that you like, that you might want to do business with, or who might want to mentor you. Yes?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's talk about mentorship for a moment. If you've got someone that's just starting out in real estate investing, is mentorship really important?
It's very important. It's hard to answer the questions you don't even know to ask, right? So that's what a good mentor will do, is ask you questions, probe you to understand, exactly what you're trying to do.
Right.
So I think it's terribly important. I mean, I still have a coach now, mostly for my residential real estate business, not on the investing side. Mm-hmm. But, part of me being in Phoebe is mentorship, like not just me mentoring people, but I get a chance to invite people up on the stage that have a really deep knowledge on, things that I may not have as deep of a knowledge on. Uh-huh. Right. So I have to be there every single month and interview them and ask them questions. I'm learning as well, right? And which is a way that I receive mentorship and expand my brain on what's possible. And, Mark, you know this has been a crazy time, right? The world's always changing,
boy.
right? So the things that made sense right now, the same concepts that I may have learned 5 years ago don't apply, right? So
Mhm.
staying current and staying on top of, how rates are affecting the market and, what's happening in the commercial sector. Is now a good time to invest or not?
Right.
You have to be paying attention. You have to be involved in the game. And if you don't
Mhm.
have a baller amount of money where you can go deploy $5 million,
Right.
being in a community or a club like Phoebe, where you're just getting exposed to what's happening, is a
Mhm.
way to, kind of stay involved in the conversation.
Well, you know that the majority of the people that I work with are over age 55. Okay. So I'm working with a much older community. It's not uncommon. As a matter of fact, it's unfortunately too common that a lot of the times I'm working with widows or widowers, and they're in situations where maybe they've got a $500,000 of liquid assets, and the big bulk of their estate is their home. Okay, it's worth
Mhm.
maybe 800,000, a couple of $1 million, but they're living on Social Security, and they've got this $500,000 that they're going through. Maybe it's in a 401k, or maybe it's just in the bank, maybe it's just in a Schwab account or something like that. Um, and they're always concerned about creating income, and they're always concerned about being able to maximize that money. What I'm really curious about, what I'm leading up to, is this. Um, if you're a woman, let's just say you're a woman, and you're in your mid to late 70s, and you've got this $500,000 in the bank, and you've got it with an investment advisor, but you're still only getting 4, 5, 6% on your money, and you're worried because you're going through it at the rate of $100,000 a year, and whatever it might be. Would Phoebe still be, for somebody that's older like that? Would Phoebe still be something that's vital and viable, where they could get information so that they might consider real estate investing with some of that money, or are they going to feel kind of like a duck out of water?
Depends on the person. I mean, we certainly have some older people. Last night, a friend of mine, Merrill, attended this event. Merrill's in his mid 80s now. He's been investing for a while. He's not starting out, but if you're interested in learning more, if you're willing to take a little risk, and look, if you're getting 4 to 6% in a managed account, that's not that bad compared to what you would be getting in real estate, because the type of real estate you should be investing in when you're in your mid 70s is completely different than the type of real estate you should be investing in when you're in your mid 30s,
Explain
right?
that to us. Explain that.
So, generally what happens when you invest in real estate is the higher reward you get is based on you taking higher risk,
Mhm.
right? So as we get older, as humans, we should be less concerned about capital growth and more concerned about capital preservation, right? So, as a real estate investor, even, I'm 54, I'm middle age, right? So, but even the types of things that I'm looking at now are maybe less risky than what I would have been looking at 25 years ago. So, but it doesn't mean, that there aren't people that are in their 60s and 70s that are looking to take on more risk. They do want growth. I
Mhm.
think that, if you're looking at investing in real estate, if you're looking for double-digit returns, and that's kind of what you're focused on, as long as you understand that, look, there's more risk associated with that. And as long as you're the type of person that is a risk taker, I'm an investor, but there's a lot of people
Mhm.
that aren't, right? So if you're not someone who's interested in taking risk, and if you're not interested in maybe deploying capital with another human being who you just met at a real estate investment club, then
Right.
Phoebe may not be the right thing for you. But maybe you can still get the same kind of knowledge to start off with, listening to different podcasts. There's all kinds of great podcasts out there about investing in real estate where you can
Mhm.
start to learn about it. And then maybe that would be the first step before you go and actually, participate in an in-person real estate investment club, where now you're getting that human contact and can meet some people that may have some of these kinds of opportunities.
Let's take a different scenario. Going back to my example, it's not uncommon, and I'm sure you've met many people in similar situations, uh, where people have free and clear properties. Okay,
Mhm.
And they want to invest, but at the same token, they're not sure how to take that money out and where to put it because they're afraid of loss. We're going to have to take a break in a few minutes, but when we come back, I want to address this. All right, in terms of the best way to possibly invest before or instead of selling your primary residence. Okay. All right.
Okay.
We'll cover that in a few minutes. To those of you listening, 951-922-3532. David Coe is here. He can answer some of your questions about real estate. Pick up the phone. You're sitting in traffic going home on a Friday. I know you're not moving. You're just sitting still. Pick up the phone. Give us a call. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to Reverse Your Thinking. We're back on Reverse Your Thinking, where we help you separate fact from fiction. And today we're doing that with regard to real estate, investing, and real estate clubs. And our guest is David Coe, who's graciously agreed to stay with us till the end of the show, because we're really drilling down into some really important stuff where a lot of you can make some money and accumulate a lot of wealth if you open up your mind and separate fact from fiction. Give us a call at 951-922-3532 if you want to talk to David. He's absolutely willing to talk to you and answer some of your questions. David, before the break, we were talking about if somebody's got a free and clear house, all right, that's worth, let's say, a couple of $1 million, and they can get, say, $1 million out on a reverse mortgage, all right? So they can get $1 million out on that piece of property. Without having to worry about making payments on it, which takes a lot of stress out of the situation. But they're gun shy. They're scared. They don't know a whole bunch about investing. Maybe they've been going to some of your Phoebe meetings. Maybe they haven't. What would your recommendation be, aside from getting knowledge, on the best thing to do, especially considering the fact that if they were investing, it wouldn't be for long-term growth or to leave a bigger estate. It would be to create income, current income. What would be the best way for them to approach that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that little twist you put there on the end of they don't have to pay any interest on the money is a good one. Let's assume that we didn't have that twist, and then I'll answer it with the twist. Because actually, I think the answer is the same way. Look, the simplest form of investment you're going to make is becoming a lender, right? So let's just say I had $1 million in debt. Or $1 million in equity, and I took that out, right? And I want to deploy that as debt. There's a lot of people out there that need short-term bridge financing that you can secure against a piece of real estate, and you can charge a fairly high rate, right? So normally how we advise people is if you're borrowing the money for 6% or 7%,
Right.
you want to lend it out with at least a 2 or 3 point spread on top of that, right? So you're paying, whatever you're paying versus what you're earning,
Sure.
right, is the actual profit you're getting. And look, you can set those terms up to 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever the situation calls for. I think the same information we were talking about earlier is now who the person you're lending the money to becomes super important, but also the asset in which you can secure that money against is also important, right? So it's understanding that, you're going to be in a position where if something did go wrong, you had the ability to go and foreclose on that piece of property and recapture whatever money you lent. I think in the reverse mortgage format, what's really interesting is that now that spread becomes really big. You still are going to probably be looking at making 9, 10, maybe up to 15% on short-term money. And now you've got a 0% basis, right? So all of that spread could be cash that you're getting. I think you need to look at that, like over the course of the year. Just because I can make a 15% loan doesn't mean I'm making 15%. The chances of taking $1 million and consistently deploying it every single day is not what's going to happen. But you might deploy 200 here for 6 months and then 300 here for a while.
I see.
Maybe you're going to kind of average that out over the course of the year and you're making 11%, which is still a great rate of return when your basis is 0. So, that would be my advice, is someone that is looking at the very simplest, most basic kind of real estate investment.
Right.
Now, what you don't get is you don't get the upside in the equity if you were actually investing in a project, right? Or investing
Okay.
in a syndication.
Sure.
But you also don't get the headaches or the capital calls or anything else, or, just the long-term, timelines that some of those projects take. Right. So
Okay.
you can kind of recycle capital. And I know a lot of investors that are doing that. They're using 401ks, IRAs, your retirement account, all of those. You can make self-directed accounts and make loans out of that account to different people versus just keeping it in a mutual fund or however it may be invested inside of your IRA. You need
Right.
to create a different kind of IRA, some one that's self-directed that will allow you to deploy that capital. But if in your situation, for that person who doesn't have a ton of real estate experience, but is looking for cash flow and is sitting on a pile of equity, making short-term bridge financing loans is something that, most people can wrap their head around with,
Sure.
with a good amount of education, and something that's probably lower on the risk of what you may have. And it's liquid, right? Those
Right.
kinds of notes pay every single month versus a share in a syndication might only pay every quarter, right? So if you're looking for cash flow,
Yeah.
that's a great way of creating cash flow, with that equity.
Is this a topic that's covered in Phoebe?
Not every month, right? We
Right.
tend to rotate topics, but absolutely. In fact, we just had a panel on becoming a private lender 2 months ago. That was our February panel. So I mean, look, every real estate deal has debt in it, right? Like there's very rarely, debt's usually the largest piece of your capital stack when you're investing in real estate. So we talk about debt all the time, but we do have some meetings specifically where we just talk about becoming a private lender. What are the things you want to look at? What type of due diligence should you be doing? How do you structure deals? A lot of those types of things. You might not just go to one meeting and get everything you need,
Right.
but over the course of hearing it from multiple people and meeting private lenders and asking them questions on how they structure their deals, who does their paperwork, how do they secure their money, all those types of things, that a good
Are
attorney
available.
and a good CPA is what you need to get started investing in real estate.
Sounds terrific. David, if our audience wants to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Best way is by email. They can email me, David at coeregroup.com.
Say it again.
David at coeregroup.com.
COEREGROUP.com.
Yes, sir.
That sounds great. David, thank you so much for coming on. You were absolutely terrific. I have no doubt that somebody out there is going to benefit from the time you took. And we will definitely have you back. No question about that. All right. As long as you can make the time for us. You're listening to Reverse Your Thinking. I'm your host, Mark Gertz. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Stay safe and get out of that traffic.
Where the living is good.